My dear friend Proculus, you amongst all of us here, around the dining table, partaking of the 12 punishing courses of my zodiac dishes, liberally washed down with copious amounts of 100-year-old Opimian Falernian, can surely regale us with a ghost-ridden yarn. For you nightly deal with the dead as an undertaker of Capua.
I personally know nothing of ghosts, Trimalchio, but for such a gracious host as yourself and your following of esteemed dinner guests, I can tell you about my skull and bones profession, which is just as blood-curdling of a stomach-churning telling. We will begin then with the corpses I collect, and our first inquires will be into the resources they provide of dissected remedies, craved after by those who are most desperate, seeking to cure their various maladies. But I warn you, this is a subject replete with boundless difficulties at the very outset. I must say, what I am going to reveal should not go beyond the walls of your abode, which of relating I can only spew when pissed out of my skull on the finest wine you have provided, just as I provide the rarest of Pluto's wines for those in their time of need, who desperately turn towards me, the collector of corpses. A rare wine of the dead I can procure, which contradictorily is the very wine of life itself, vain patrician women seek out to thirstily imbibe, so that they can retain their beauty from the ravages of aging. Such are my main buyers of the reddest of coagulating wines still pumping through drying veins. I can readily provide for coin patrician women lavishly part with. That, or offering the most intimate of services in lieu of payment, who are in the habit of drinking the blood wine of those fallen gladiators I gather up from off the fermenting sands of the bloodied arena, whose severed veins I then drain for the feral witch-wives of senators, getting drunken upon the ambrosial draughts teeming with the last vestiges of a youthful life, as it were. A thing that, when we see it done by the wild beasts, even upon the very same stage of the arena of Mars, inspires us with a rousing horror at the spectacle. And yet these patrician women, forsooth, consider it a far more effectual cure for the disheveling of their flesh to invigorate, should they be able to quaff the still warm, breathing blood from the cut throat of a fatally wounded gladiator. A hideous act made tolerable by their malady still most miserable. I provide as a service for a heavy price, and as they apply their patrician mouths to the wound of the plebeian to draw forth his very life, and this, though it is regarded as an act of impiety to apply the patrician lips to the wound of the plebs, even of wild beasts. Others there are, again, who bathe in the ejaculations of gladiators before being dispatched, whose rigor mortis erections and hardened balls draw much attention to make of as a meal, along with the marrow of their leg bones to sup upon. And when there are no gladiator carcasses available, the brains of discarded plebeian infants are sought after, becoming the objects of the maddening desperations of aging patricians to keep death at bay. Among the Greeks, too, there are not a few who have enlarged upon the distinctive flavors of each one of the viscera and members of the human body, pursuing their researches to the very parings of the nails, as though, forsooth, it could possibly be accounted the pursuit of health for those with the patrician coin to make themselves as strong as a wild beast, and so deserve to contract the disease from the very remedies they adopt for avoiding it. Most righteously by Hercules, might say you, and others to also agree of roaring judgment. But I care not to judge, I am only interested in acquiring the coin in their patrician purses. If such attempts are all in vain, are they disappointed of their cure? I think not. To examine the human entrails of plebs is deemed an act of impiety. What then must it be of direst desperation for a patrician to devour them? So says the legendary Persian magus and alchemist Osthenes, and I, to quote badly, "Who was it that first devised these practices? For it is thee that I accuse, thou uprooter of all human laws, thou invento of these monstrosities, devised, no doubt, with the view that mankind might not forget thy name. Who was it that first thought of devouring each member of the human body? By what conjectural motives was he induced? What can possibly have been the origin of such a system of medicine as this? Who was it that thus made the very poisons less baneful than the antidotes prescribed for them? I can tell you who had first introduced these monstrous remedies to the world. It was my dark muse, Medea, the sensual and ravishing sorceress of the Greeks, who long ago had entered the royal chambers, knife in hand, commanding servants to bring her an old sheep. Plunging her knife into the animal, she bled it nearly dry, and then threw the limp carcass into a bubbling cauldron of youthful blood. Its feeble bleeding was soon replaced by the frolicking leaps of a young lamb. In this marvelous spectacle, Medea demonstrated her ability to transfuse life to the dead and dying. Her husband's enemy, the elderly and bedridden King Pelias, is next. Medea turns impatiently to the king's daughters, who hovered around her in a trance, drugged by the witch's herbs and humbled by Medea's otherworldly powers. "Why do you hesitate and do nothing?" the enchantress snaps. "Go now! Draw your swords and drain out his old blood, so that I may fill his veins with your young blood." Slowly, the drugged daughters approach their father, who looks up at them with trusting eyes. Then, like ravenous beasts, they pounce upon him. Mimicking Medea's brutal and precise cuts, the daughters deftly slice open Pelias's veins, draining them dry, and likewise slitting their own so as to fill his drowning mouth with their youthful blood. Medea flees the scene, smug in the success of her deception. Granted that it was a deception, the barbarous and outlandish tribes first devised such practices of Medea's homeland of Colchis, upon which Jason and his Argonauts had alighted, seeking the golden fleece hung in a tree when fathoming the secrets of the serpent, Medea. Must then the men of Greece, too, have adopted Medea's golden fleece arts as their own? Only the most desperate among them, having purses heavy with coin, had the monetary riches to do so, seeking to avert the touch of death at any cost. For instance, in the memoirs of Democritus, still extant, that for some death-touch diseases, the skull of a malefactor is most efficacious, while for the treatment of others, that of one who has been a friend or guest is required. Don't worry, Trimalchio, your skull is safe with me, just as mine is hopefully safe with you and your guests. Apollonius again informs us in his writings that the most effectual remedy for toothache is to scarify the gums with the tooth of a man who has died a violent death, and according to Meletus, human gall is a cure for cataract. For epilepsy, Artemon has prescribed water drawn from a spring in the night and drunk from the skull of a man who has been slain and whose body remains unburnt. From the skull, too, of a man who had been hanged, Antaeus made skull-cap pills that were to be an antidote to the bite of a rabid dog. Even more than this, many have resorted to similar remedies for the cure of four-footed beasts. Even for tympanitis in oxen, for instance, the horns have been perforated and human bones inserted. And when swine have been found to be diseased, fine wheat has been given them, which has lain for a night in the spot where a human being has been slain or burnt. Far from us, beyond Capua, such prescriptions as these can be uncovered under Rome's skirt of abundant plebeian corpses. It will be for me and others of my skull and bones profession, who conveniently provide the corpse materials for these hideous remedies, which are not seen as abominations by the desperate patricians, who, for instance, seek out the milk of a newly departed nursing woman, believing it has a curative effect, or desiring the spittle of dead actors, which is seen to be useful by senators, or intimately engaging with the corpse of a virgin, and other instances of a similar nature. Most of us here around your zodiac table, Trimalchio, do not look upon life as so essentially desirable that it must be prolonged at any cost, be it what it may. And those who are of that opinion, be assured, whoever you may be, that you will die nonetheless, even though you shall have lived in the midst of obscenities or abominations. Let each then reckon this as one great solace to his mind, that of all the blessings which nature has bestowed upon us, there is none greater than the death, which comes at a seasonable hour. And that the very best feature in connection with it is that every person has it in his own power to procure it for himself.